So we're diving into our chapter or lesson 3, how were native peoples of the Pacific coast shaped by their surroundings. So this is going to be our guiding question. We're going to write that in our notes. A variety of landscapes. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Make sure that you put this as a header. So our notes are going to look like this. Boom. All right, we would copy that just like this. I'm going to do it in all caps. How were native peoples of the Pacific Northwest shaped by their, the last part, surroundings. All right, so this is my guiding question. Right, I'm going to be seeking to answer this all throughout the rest of this little lesson. And our new heading right here is going to be a variety of landscapes. Okay, so let's get started. Native Americans settled in a number of vastly different natural environments in the American West. Native Americans established settlements in the snowy Arctic regions of Alaska, the forested coasts of Oregon and Washington, and the arid deserts of Southern California. Surviving in each of these climates required very specific skills, and as a result, Native Americans across the American West developed unique ways of life. Ancestors of the Navajo and Apache people may have reached the Pacific Northwest about 5000 BC. Eventually, some of the descendants of these people migrated south, but others remained in the region. The Tlingit people belong to the same language family as the Navajo and Apache, meaning the groups share a common ancestor, but their surroundings have caused them to develop a different way of life. So these are things, we were in the really general section. We were talking about a lot of broad things. But now we're getting into specific names of people and details, and we're going to go ahead and write that down. So the red is going to be something I'm going to take notes. I'm going to move this down over here. And I'm going to make this even bigger. Tlingit people. Let me get this right. Tlingit people belong to the same language family as the Navajo and Apache. And then, so that was the red note. And then the blue note, their surroundings have caused them to develop a very different way of life. All right, so then that's an example of how we're going to be taking notes. I'm not going to keep popping this up over here. I'm going to highlight in different colors, and that's how you're going to know when it's a new note. All the red will be together, all the blue will be together, and I'll cycle through the colors. But that's what you're going to be copying. That's what your notes are going to look like. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this up out of the way. And we can see over here a map before we move on. What do we notice about this map? What do we see? I'll pause the video and I'll give you guys time to talk it out. So here we're moving on. We're on the next page, Native Americans of California. And you can see I've headed my paper wherever you're at. You might be farther down here. That's okay. But this is what we got so far. So let's dive in to reading. The Native Americans of California can be divided into at least 6 distinct cultural regions: Northwestern, Northeastern, Central, Great Basin, Southern, and Colorado River. Groups in each area share cultural similarities. Some of the peoples living in the Central region, for instance, speak similar languages. So that red is going to be something that I write down as one sentence, and that blue is going to be something that I also write down in one sentence. So let's look. I'd have 6 distinct cultural regions: Northwest, Northeast, Central, Great Basin, Southern, and Colorado River. Right? That would be my red note. And then here's my blue note. Share cultural similarities. Right? So that's an example of how we're using these notes. Like I said, I'm not going to keep writing all of these. I'm just going to pause it and let you copy down the different parts. Make sure you remember to leave yourself a space in between the paragraphs. So the next one's going to start down here. So let's go ahead and continue to read. And I'll get this out of the way. The location of each group directly affects their culture and way of life. The Cahuilla, for example, built irrigation systems to raise crops in the desert basins in the south, while the Yurok, living along the northern coast, fished for most of their food. So I'll go ahead, pause the video, and let you get those notes copied down, and we'll continue in 3, 2, 1. So let's move on. We got our next chunk right here. This little chunk. And the Pomo are part of the Central California cultural area. That's our first note. Before encountering Europeans, the Pomo thrived by making use of the plentiful natural resources available in their region. The Pomo collected acorns, fished with nets and traps, and hunted deer, birds, and other small game. Round houses made from wood, earth, and grass functioned as homes and gathering places. So I'll go ahead and pause that and let you get caught up, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Basket weaving played a large role in Pomo life and traditions. Pomo baskets, often decorated with feathers and shells, are well known around the world for quality among art collectors. Baskets served a purpose in a number of aspects of Pomo life, including cooking and childcare. Museums collect Pomo baskets as valuable works of art. So we'll go ahead and pause this, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Farther to the south, before the arrival of Europeans, groups in the Central Valley, including the Miwok, built their cultures around the region's resources. In the valley, Miwok hunters stalked deer, elk, and antelope. In the marshes, they set traps for otters and beavers. So we'll pause that, and I'll give you a couple seconds to get that caught up, and I'll have continue in 3, 2, 1. And we're picking up on the next page. Forests may have been the most pivotal source of the Miwok way of life. Oak trees provided the Miwok with their staple product, the acorn. Children would shake loose acorns from the oak's upper branches, while women collected the fallen acorns in large baskets. The Miwok women ground the acorns into flour to make bread, biscuits, and soup. So I'll go ahead and pause that right there, and we'll pick up in 3, 2, 1. And we'll continue. Southern California's deserts do not have the same wealth of resources. There, groups such as the Cahiwa, the Serrano, and the Chimihueve adapted to use the few plants that grow in the desert. The Cahiwa also developed irrigation systems to raise crops, including corn, squash, beans, and melons. By digging ditches to feed into small lakes, the Cahiwa made use of the limited precipitation to sustain a vibrant culture. I'll go ahead and pause that, and I'll give you time to fill out those answers, and we'll pick up in 3, 2, 1. So here we see we're studying a new section, Native Americans of the Pacific Northwest, and wherever you have your notes, this is my example of notes, blah, 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 up here. We're starting a new section header, right? We got to put this right here so we know where we're at in our notes in relation to the story or the text. So let's go ahead and dive in. Native peoples of this region reside in communities along the Pacific coast from what is now British Columbia to Northern California. So real quick, we see British Columbia would be up here, up to about Northern California. So that gives you kind of an idea of where we're talking about. So go ahead and copy these notes, and then we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So let's move in right here. And let's keep reading. Long ago, wood from the area's forests allowed these people to construct homes, carve canoes and masks, and fashion household items, including dishes and spoons. The Pacific Northwest peoples believed that all living things, including plants and animals, had rights that should be respected. They were careful to cut down only as many trees as they needed to continue their way of life. So go ahead and pause this video, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Pacific Northwest groups such as the Tlingit carved totem poles as a way of chronicling their clan and family histories. Totem poles are made from long logs that are carved and decorated to represent people or animals. Each totem pole is made up of a series of these symbols called totems. The totems and their order often reflect the stories of the clans and families of a village. Now, notice right here in your book, this word is highlighted, totem poles. Anytime that the book highlights a word, you know it's something that you need to be paying attention to and write down the definition for. I got these marked up in different color highlight. We'll go ahead and pause the video, give you some time to get caught up, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Tlingit and Chinook families often marked major life events, such as a wedding or a change of leader, with a ceremony known as a potlatch. Another highlighted word in your text, so you know that we're going to be talking about that. At a potlatch, guests of the family receive gifts and enjoy feasting and music. The host is responsible for gift giving and sometimes can offer more than 100 presents at a single potlatch. The host receives respect and standing among the community as a result of his or her wisdom and appropriate generosity. Pacific Northwest peoples still hold potlatches today, and they are an important source of cultural identity for many people who live in the region. So I'll go ahead and pause that, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. The Maka people made their home on the shores of the Pacific Ocean and the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Though the Maka hunted many kinds of sea animals, including seals, porpoises, and sea otters, whale hunting held a special place in Maka life. You got to be pretty hardcore to go hunting whales, right? So we'll go ahead and pause that and give you a couple minutes to fill in those notes, and then we'll move on. In 3, 2, 1. Maka canoes carrying as many as 60 hunters at a time would set out in search of whales. After a successful hunt, the Maka gave thanks for their triumph. Every part of a whale was used in different Maka activities. I wonder what that looked like. 60 dudes in a giant canoe hunting whales. That would have been pretty scary. Those whales can flip a canoe really easy. So I'll go ahead and stop the video here and give you time to get caught up on those notes, and we'll pick back up in 3, 2, 1. So here's some pictures I found. They're still doing this today, apparently. That canoe don't look very safe if I'm taking down something that big. Here's a pretty cool looking picture of them using a harpoon. What do you think it would be like to go after a whale on a canoe? Why don't you just turn and talk with your partner about that for a minute, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So we're starting a new section, so make sure that we get this set up in our notes, right? Called subarctic people, or peoples. I should add an S to that, and I'll go ahead and give you a second to do that, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. The subarctic region of North America stretches from Alaska on the Pacific Ocean to Newfoundland and Labrador on the Atlantic coast. A northern forest and marshland known as the taiga covers large parts of the subarctic. So pretty much all of this is going to get copied down, right? So I'll give you a couple seconds to do that, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So here we see an example of what they're talking about. This is the Arctic region, most of Alaska and most of Canada, right? So here's Alaska, the Pacific Ocean, right? And then we got the Arctic Ocean over in here. This is the Atlantic Ocean over here. This right here is called Hudson Bay. And as you can guess, this area gets very, very cold. Not a place that Mr. Cooper would want to live at all, but it looks very beautiful to look at. But there you go. So now you have an idea of what's going on. Many subarctic peoples hunted by following the seasonal movements of moose and caribou, and also fished for salmon. Hunters often used bows and arrows or set up traps to capture their prey. To protect from the cold, people made leggings, moccasins, and parkas from animal skins. Some groups set up temporary hunting and fishing camps of lean-to structures with sloped walls for shelter. During the long and snowy winter, some groups built more permanent structures. The Deg-Chinag in the western subarctic built partially below-ground houses from wood and sod. So, here's a dude that took down a moose with some bows. You got to be pretty hardcore to be able to take one of those down with a bow and arrow, because they are very big and they could hurt you. And if you missed or you didn't do a good job, pretty scary, right? So go ahead and get those notes copied down, and we'll pick up in 3, 2, 1. Some subarctic groups along the Pacific coast had permanent villages run by a council of elders, but the group farther inland were organized in smaller bands of family members. Go ahead and copy those down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So while we're here real quick, we'll go ahead and take a look at this map that they got. So this green, as you can see, we got our key down here. The green is the subarctic region, and then the purple is the Arctic region. Sub meaning below, so the below Arctic, and then the Arctic region. So we see some different names, right? Different names of different things. This group is called the Beaver, right? These names in bold are going to be the names of different tribes, right? We got the North Alaskan Inuit, Central Alaskan, Labrador Inuit. So I'm seeing Inuit over here kind of spread out. I'm seeing Cree, that's spread out a little bit. So these groups are not just in one area. Some of them are spread out over. This is a big amount of space. looks small on a map. This is a lot of ground coverage. So there's a lot of people up there. Super cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. So we're moving on to a new section called Arctic people. Make sure that you get that blocked off. Write that in your notes as a new section, and we'll go ahead and get started. Beyond the tree-covered taiga is a treeless zone of rocky soil and low-growing shrubs called the tundra. For most of the year, the Arctic region is covered in ice and snow. The native peoples of the Arctic, such as the Inuit, Yupik, and Aleut, adapted to the extreme cold, making clothes from caribou furs and other animal hides. The winters are severe with only a few hours of sunlight per day. During this time, many Arctic peoples constructed below-ground houses or snow-block homes called igloos. They hunted seal, walruses, and whales along the coast. Many Inuit hunted with long spears called harpoons. Right, so we see over here an example of one of the houses that's partially below ground. Looks cozy. So I'll go ahead and pause and give you a couple minutes to get these copied down, and we'll pick up in 3, 2, 1. Real quick for you, here's a picture of, so this is a walrus right here. They got the long tusks and some seals for you. Pretty cool. These are things that they would be hunting that time. Looks like there's plenty of meat on them. I don't know what they would taste like. Probably taste like chicken. Everything else does. So let's go ahead and move on. The brief summers bring with them very long days of sunlight in which streams of water from snowmelt attract migratory animals such as caribou and musk oxen. These animals were the primary hunting targets of Arctic peoples in the summer. So what's happening is this long sunlight is melting the water, and that's going to attract migratory animals like the caribou and musk oxen to drink the water, makes them good hunting targets of peoples in the summer. And here's a picture of caribou, kind of like reindeer. And here's a picture of some musk oxen. They look big and stanky, right? But there's plenty of meat on there. Okay. Go ahead and get those notes copied down, and we'll pick up in 3, 2, 1. Among some Inuit, the senior male was considered the clan chief. The chief of the strongest clan was the village chief. Some groups had no chief. So senior male would mean like the oldest man. Whoever the oldest man was, he'd be considered the clan chief. This is all relevant information, so go ahead and write that down in your notes, and we'll wrap it up in 3, 2, 1.